Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Derek Marshall.
And I'm your not so good looking sub-host tonight, Rich Gear. Glad to be here with you, Derek, again. And now you're the main guy.
So I'm sitting on this side.
You're sitting on the main side.
I actually
the big kahuna
prefer
seat.
sitting on that side because I think I look better on the camera. Not I don't look any good on the camera at all. But
anyway,
that side's an easier side for me.
So tonight,
into the conversation too a little bit. So.
And we have to introduce the director of Revolution Against Evolution, Doug Sharp. He's with us on Zoom.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I was going to include you out, Doug. So
that's right. We forgot all about him, even though we just jumped through our rear ends.
Jumped right through that. Yeah.
Trying to get him going on Zoom because he fooled us. He said he wasn't going to be with us, but he got it. So
we got it. He made it. Anyway, we're going to talk. What's the title you have of this show?
It's going to be Early Man. So this is based upon the third chapter of Revolution Against Evolution, Doug's book.
Okay.
And we're doing. I call this classic RAE, or pure RAE. This is pure every chapter by chapter of Doug's book. We are going through for my first shows here, so everybody can see all the good stuff that he has in his book. And I'm learning a lot from. I'm getting a lot. I'm probably getting the most out of this of everybody, is especially with this early man chapter that we're doing. This is the idea. Evolutionists have gotten a lot of mileage out of this ape-man concept. And I'm just getting tired of hearing about it.
Yeah, they do, because what we found, there's been a lot of books written by creationists. Bones of Contention is one of them that comes to my mind. Buried Alive is another one. There's a lot of good books dealing with evolution, the evolution of man, which really puts the lie to it. Okay,
yeah,
tells you really how things have been not only manipulated, things they blame creationists. They actually accuse the creationists of lying or manipulating data, when point of fact, the evidence is all pointing to evolutionary manipulation of the data, including fraudulent and just misplaced. Some of it, as a person, I want to believe the best in people, and I'd say, well, maybe some of it's just an honest mistake, but some of the stuff is so blatantly dishonest that it stretches credibility.
Yeah.
This was not perpetrated for the public to promote an agenda, which many times has gone to many years before, and they've ruined a generation before they've actually come clean on one.
Right.
By that time, they've already wrecked the agenda.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that. Now, we've got a really good example of this blatant aspect of what they're trying to pull on us, and we have a really good show for you today. We're going to start out with Doug's creation barrage, and he's going to you're going to see some really shocking stuff on this lie that's being perpetrated, plus you'll learn a little bit about what we're about to talk about. So go ahead and run that video.
Have you noticed that at the beginning of the school year, National Geographic usually comes out with a new ape-man fossil? Why is this? The pernicious message to our students is that you are not a descendant of Adam and Eve. The Bible story isn't true. Instead, Neanderthal, Java Man, and Lucy are your ancestors. You are simply the end result of millions of years of evolution, starting with slime. Dr. John Sanford has written this book, Contested Bones, challenging these claims. He examines each of the examples of fossil man and concludes that they are fully ape, completely human, or mixtures of bones from both. Here are his conclusions. Let's take these fossil discoveries. Neanderthal, Erectus, Naledi, the Hobbit are all fully human, is in decline. The discoverers claim is that they're subhuman species. Sebeda, habilis, and Lucy's kind are a mixture of human and Australopithecines. And then Ardipithecus is an extinct ape, likely mixed. Evolutionists will go so far to support their claims to the point where if the evidence doesn't fit what they expect, they will doctor it. They don't even hide this. Here is a clip from a PBS special on Lucy.
The ape that stood up, it was a revolutionary idea. We needed Owen Lovejoy's expertise again, because the evidence wasn't quite adding up. The knee looked human, but the shape of her hip didn't. Superficially, her hip resembled a chimpanzee's, which meant that Lucy couldn't possibly have walked like a modern human. But Lovejoy noticed something odd about the way the bones had been fossilized.
When I put the two parts of the pelvis together that we had, this has caused the two bones, in fact, to fit together so well that they're in an anatomically impossible position.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bones seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost. Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
Now, would you want to base your whole life on these particular claims? I would say you would want to reject this whole concept of ape man.
Actually, a lot of the source that he's citing there is John Sanford's Bones of Contention, as you mentioned. But when we're talking about ape man, the ape man, there's some questions to consider. Even if you want to consider that existed, which it absolutely did not exist. It was we're gonna show you in the show. First of all, and this has to do with what we were talking about with the fossils, finding the fossils. We have to determine whether these fossils are even valid, first of all.
Well, yeah, and the thing about it is they start out with Australopithecines. I mean, they have things before that, but let's just say that things that evolve directly and deal directly with the evolution of man. Australopithecines. Then you have something called Homo erectus.
Yeah, we're gonna go
through
those.
Something called Homo habilis, which is really kind of in the middle there. And then you have Homo neanderthalensis, and then you have Cro-Magnon or early man. So those are kind of the simplified things that traditionally have been used to show the evolution of man. And in each and every case, what we found out, and I'll cut to the chase here a little bit. I hope it's okay if I jump a little bit. I'm notorious for that. So is it basically either have apes or you have humans.
Yeah, that's what we're going to find out here.
You don't have transitions.
Other questions, we got 3 other questions that we want to consider here. If you want to look at a fossil, is the fossil even valid, as we've just discussed? Are the dating methods used? Are they appropriate? Is it an appropriate dating method? Do the fossils follow a pattern? Do the fossils that you find actually make a sensical pattern, which we'll discuss a little bit later? And then are the interpretations and the assemblages of the fossils that they find, which is a lot of times, as we're going to talk about, is we're finding things scattered, bones scattered all over the place. And they'll find one little fossil of something, and then they'll try to assemble all the stuff that's around it into something that may or may not be a valid.
Well, there's one, and Doug, you remind me, where they was it Java Man, or I can't remember exactly which one it is now, where they found these, and I think that they might have put that in a Homo habilis type of taxonomy. But the point of it is they seem to have markings on, like they may have been hunted and killed by actually human beings. Okay, they were actually killed, and they try to make them as an evolutionary link to modern man. But modern, there's some evidence of spear things like that where they actually killed them. I don't want to get too far afield on that.
Well, you're talking about the potential.
Broken Hill Man was the one that had a bullet hole in his head.
Which one was that, Doug?
Broken Hill Man.
Oh, Broken Hill Man. I forgot about him. Yeah.
Also mentioned that.
So yeah, he's the one who wrote Buried Alive. So yeah, and I think it was Lubinow that did Bones in Contention. Am I wrong on that? Was it Lubinow that wrote that book? Who wrote Bones in Contention?
No, Buried Alive was by Jack Coozzo.
Yeah, Buried Alive Coozzo.
There's 2 similar books, Bones of Contention, and then some other Bones, Contended Bones. The one is John Sanford, Bones of Contention. Yes, is the one you're thinking.
All right, yeah, so, but Bones of Contention I thought was Lubenow, didn't he write that one? Yeah, okay, so we got flipped around, that's
so
good.
we have just outright hoaxes. The worst being Piltdown Man.
Yeah, Piltdown, yeah,
We
Piltdown
got
Man.
bones doctored with iron salts, teeth filed to look like, of course they gotta have sharp pointy teeth, right? Just this hoax persisted for over 40 years or for decades.
Well, the mandibles, they actually broke because they wouldn't fit together, okay? It was and they did some bad staining on it to make it look older. And yeah, this was used for 40 years, and they came clean, 1952, I think, was it 52? But it's 1912 is when it came into existence. And there were two guys, Pierre Chardin, who was a Jesuit priest, and a guy named Dawson, Charles Dawson. I think those are the two guys. And we're not able to prove it, but I really strongly suspect these were the ones that foisted this on the public. And 40 years, and they had all kinds of reconstructions. Artists, look, I do artwork. You can do all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And a lot of different, I did an article, illustrated an article for a friend of ours, Dr. Jerry Bergman, and he showed all the different variants they had for Piltdown Man. And it was quite startling how they did that. And they've done that for many of these reconstructions. If you want to get more ape-like, you make Neanderthal burlier and huskier, but we don't have the musculature. You can kind of analyze and do certain things morphologically through forensic medicine. You can do some things, but there are limits, and you can make them look very brutish or almost make Neanderthal Man look like a modern day guy. In fact, I've seen some guys with some of these big brow ridges, Well,
it's bad enough. I'm going to tell you my experience with Piltdown Man. Now, I'm a child of the 70s and early 80s when I was interested in this type of thing. Now, I wasn't necessarily taught about Piltdown Man, but for some reason that name stuck in my head, right? I didn't know anything about Piltdown Man. To me, it was just a name.
Okay.
And so what that means is, among all these funny names like Java Man, Piltdown Man, you consider those, this is all evidence of this thing of an ape man. Even though it was discredited, I still had that name stuck in my head. That's the point of it. And that's the point of it.
Because we've noticed in many of these things when they talk about all kinds of stuff that really seems to go against the biblical narrative, they'll come up with these big stories, everything from life on Mars to new transitional fossil, and then about 2 or 3 months later they'll say, well, no, this really isn't life on Mars.
Yeah, but it's like
damage
has already been done.
Damage has been done. Number one, number two, it's usually printed in the back of the newspaper and doesn't get any press at all. So it still lives on for many, many years. We see this in many things in the evolutionary lobby, from recapitulation, ontogeny, recapitulates phylogeny, the whole embryonic cycle, where you got it repeats the evolutionary cycle. That was used to get abortion bought into the thing because they thought we weren't really human at the time. So but fossil man is one of the worst, I think, in so many respects for hoaxes and just downright frauds. Like I say, there can be things where they just honestly made mistakes, and Nebraska Man might be one of those when they had like a tooth of an extinct pig. Well, what was it? It wasn't really a pig. It was Doug, you remember what kind of a peccary? Yeah, and which still lives today, but they built him up for one tooth. Okay, and you've got. I mean, there's so many of these that it's. What was the one you talked about, Doug? Just recently, just a second ago, I can't remember it, but they built these reconstructions up from almost nothing, and you're going, what? And by the way, that's what Homo habilis really is kind of. Nothing really fits, so they throw this in this junk bin of taxonomy, and then they build these creatures up out of it. So
one that was built up from a clavicle of a dolphin. And
Flipper Pithecus.
Yeah.
Don't you mention him? Yeah,
Flipper Pithecus there. Misinterpreted as an ape man's collarbone. This bone, they said it resembled the bone of a chimpanzee because it was just curved. They made all these inferences to that, which to me, this would imply that any bone fossil that you're going to get should have to go through an excruciating vetting process, because any given bone could be many bones, any type of bone. But I'm sure that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's why I think the skull is so important. Do you want to say something, Doug? Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that there is a
the problem that we really originated this whole ape-man stuff was the idea of pre-Adamite races. You had the explorers going to various parts of the world and coming across people groups that were radically different in structure from the Europeans that did the exploring. And so they figured that these people were not of the race of Adam, but they had to have been from a pre-Adamite race, and so they weren't subjected to the whole salvation thing. And they ended up making them slaves, and it was a motivation for the foundation for racism. And so you can sort of blame that for Darwin taking the tack of when he met up with the Fuegans and decided that they were incorrigible, they wouldn't come to Christ. He was starting to doubt his own Christianity, and went to the and after he read Charles Lyell's book, Principles of Geology, he started and going down the road of on the Beagle, going down the road of evolution.
Yeah, what's really sad about that is that many people in the church bought into this pre-Adamite. In fact, some of them, I remember reading a book called Earth's Earliest Ages, and where the demons came from were basically disembodied souls from a pre-Adamic race, and it was really terrible. It was church trying to close a door or make compromise with Darwinian thinking and evolutionary and uniformitarian thinking, trying to make compromises, and yet still hold on to a biblical worldview. So they said, that was the ruin reconstruction kind of idea. The world was made, then it was destroyed, then it was remade in 7 days, and and we have none of that around. And Doug and I have gone through this for many, and I use this and I present this many times. If you have death and dying before Adam and Eve, you have a real problem.
Right, it's pretty clear. I think it's Romans 5 is the passage. It's pretty clear that if you have death and dying before the fall, this doesn't work. It's just not scriptural at all. A lot of people miss that.
You have negated the whole purpose of the cross.
Right.
You have negated Jesus Christ's ministry entirely. And these people know that. And these people, either consciously or unconsciously, some of them was manipulative. But the fossil man was just one of those things. By the late 1800s, it was really in academia everywhere. I mean, everybody was believing in prehistoric man. Yeah. I mean, even the earliest, I used to love watching the early King Kongs and the early Lost Worlds, and they all talked about fossil ape men. That was a big deal.
Let's talk about Neanderthal man.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's go to Neanderthal man.
I mean, does he has to get saved?
Yeah. Neanderthal man
needs to be saved.
Neanderthal man is a post-fall man. He's fully human.
Yes.
And what we found out, buried alive, Jack Quozo did really a tremendous service. He was an orthodontist, actually, and he got permission to actually do a three-dimensional X-ray on the Neanderthal skulls. Number one, he found out that the jawbone had been pushed forward 30 degrees to make it look more ape-like, or pushed forward. Anyway, and so there were things that were manipulated even in Neanderthal, the way they reconstructed that, and that may have been inadvertent based on their already preconceived notions. But then, the brow ridging and what they call, it's an occipital bun, it's a little bump in the back of the skull, is kind of, it's very interesting because Neanderthal has this, and modern man does not have this per se. Homo erectus, by the way, which is supposedly another precursor, has the same brow ridging and occipital bun. And his skull's a little bit smaller, and people say, well, that proves they were precursors. I said, no. Human beings have the propensity that's the word I'm thinking of. The
propensity.
Yeah, I guess propensity is good enough word. The proclivity. They actually, to be fully human, 750 cc to 2100 cc brain size. Okay. In fact, sometimes your larger brain size means you're mentally defective. Mongolism, Mongoloidism can be one of those. But the point of it is that this reconstruction, and it almost sounds like a murder mystery. He got chased around a lot, got real things. But he was asked about the brow ridging, because in some of these caves where they found Neanderthal men, they found Neanderthal, what would appear to be Neanderthal children. And they go, well, well, the Neanderthal kids, don't they have the brow ridging? They do not. So he started looking at the facial and the tooth, when the teeth would have erupted and things he would be able to put together. And he realized these were skulls of people that were at least 200 years old, 209 years old. That's based on modern age patterns.
Right.
But if you base it on older patterns, for instance, he did that. He says these people could have been up to 400 years old, which you're talking at the time of Arphaxad. The other one would be more like the time of Peleg, okay?
Right.
But you're post flood, but pre Abrahamic times. But even so, you've got people that are living long ages, and that's why. And we know that bones continue to grow.
That's exactly.
It's the only part of the body, human body, that does that. But you start with plates; they grow together. But over a period of time, brow ridging can start happening. He basically extrapolated it out, did some computer models, and that made sense. And the kids did not have it. So this really just puts the lie that brow ridging, although the occipital bun is something kind of special that we may have lost.
So let's talk about the other.
You have Darwin, who had a brow ridge, and
Didn't he though?
and I had a chemistry teacher who had a brow ridge like that. So, if you put a suit on of clothes on a Neanderthal man, have him walk down the street, he wouldn't attract any more notice than anybody else.
So let's talk about the other side of the coin here. We talked about man. All of what we're talking about is these fossils, if they were correctly assembled, we'll find they're either men or they're monkeys. All right, there's no in between. And but we do have right. Well, they're mixtures of both because we're mixing the bones. But if we were to actually have the pure sample, we would find that they're either one or the
Homo
other.
habilis is one of those.
So what about Australopithecines?
That or Doug? Doug and I love to talk about
I know you do.
Australopithecines. We do.
I just learned how to pronounce it.
Australopithecines. Well, there's the Africanus and the Afarensis, and there's different variants of what it is. But really, that's an extinct chimpanzee when you get right down to it. Okay, and some people made a note. How come we don't find any fossil chimpanzees? And I said, well, probably Australopithecines might qualify in some of that. I'm being a little glib here, but the reality is this. You got Doug and I went to a place called the Sterkfontein Caves, and for years there's been a lot of, I think, chicanery because one of the fossils, Lucy, had no knees, they couldn't find them, and hands and feet were missing. Okay, so they speculated they were upright, and they had the feet were human feet, hands were human hands, based on another set of fossils called the Laetoli footprints, which were a little bit smaller and seemed to fit the size of the skeletons of Lucy. So they conflated those footprints in the Laetoli. What's that, Tanzania? Is that where they're at? Where are they at?
In that area.
I think it's Tanzania, but anyway, the Laetoli footprints. And so they speculate, well, this is the precursor to, they've got fully human. In fact, when I went to the Michigan State Museum, they had the reconstruction of the fully hands and feet, right? The Chicago Museum of Natural History has the same thing, okay? And so, but when Doug and I went to the Sterkfontein Caves, we had Littlefoot, Doug, and who's the other? There was another one.
Mrs. Pless is what they call it.
Oh, Mrs. Pless, yeah. Okay. And what happens is that those had their feet and hands already there. And guess what? They were more arboreal than modern chimpanzees.
Right, yeah.
Their feet were curved.
They
Their
had
hands were
opposing
curved.
toes
It was
on their feet.
They were not
Hands for feet.
Yet you still have over at Sterkfontein. When Doug and I were first there, it was pretty primitive, and you could you could look at stuff and say, wow, this is what it is. But now they've got a whole evolutionary museum there. They built it all up, and it's all the evolutionary propaganda. I'm sorry, but even when they have the evidence right there that Lucy is not a precursor to modern man.
Okay, so next we're going to have a little segment that I'm introducing my Chemistry of God series, talk about the creation function. And a lot of the reason why these scientists can take one or two bones and construct an entire form is because a lot of these forms have Fibonacci ratios of bone lengths. And so we're going to be talking about the how much we see spirals in the all around us in the world. I hope you enjoyed our show. And please join us again on Revolution Against Evolution.
Bye now.
Spirals are everywhere. Spirals are a very popular design that we see around us in our culture. That's been that way for thousands of years. Spirals are spiritual. Spirals are natural. Spirals are very mathematical. And in many cultures, spirals are thought to be the pattern of creation. And we're going to examine that for a few minutes today here. For example, in Newgrange, Ireland, we have a spiral, a triple spiral pattern that's shown on the rock at the entrance and also on the floor at the entrance, a triple spiral. We also have the Hohokam petroglyph in the Sagaro Natural Monument, and that is a spiral, actually has 7 rotations also, which I like, there on a rock at that site. And also a nice spiral patterns or examples of spiral patterns we see at the Newspaper Rock in Utah. I was alerted to this by Doug Sharp himself. If you look at this guy right here, you have several spirals that are and wheels that are included among all the different patterns that you'll find on that petroglyph. Spirals are natural. We find spirals all over nature. We have spirals in plants. We have spirals in galaxies, spiral galaxies. We have spirals all over. Both shells are spiral patterns. Our DNA is a double helix pattern of the spiral. Spiral patterns in nature, of course, hurricanes and tornadoes are spirals, and also spirals in mathematics. For example, spirals are mathematical. You've heard of fractals before, maybe the Mandelbrot fractal set. A fractal is very, very broad in its definition. It's basically any self-similar design or pattern where you can zoom in or zoom out and still have the same pattern. So that actually applies to spirals. There's several types of spirals. We'll talk about the Fibonacci spiral, which if you look at this diagram here, you can see it starts small and goes out big. And also you have what's called a logarithmic spiral, which is this pattern here, which has, for every time the spiral makes a rotation, it is a multiple or presents a mathematical multiple of E as far as its radius going outward. Spirals are creation. If you read, there's several, of course you have the Genesis 1 creation account, but also there's lots of other verses of creation in the Bible. For example, Isaiah 40:26, creation is brought out by number. According to Psalms 139:16, spirals or creation was brought out in continuance. Proverbs 8:27, God used a compass. And also Psalm 139:17, the spiral or the creation pattern that God promoted resulted in his song. We have 6 days and nights of active creation, and every rotation of that spiral represents 1 day, which is one complete rotation of the earth. So spirals are creation.